Hello, my friends, and welcome to The Infinite Screen, the podcast which helps you to think through what should you watch in a world where you could watch anything. And something very exciting today, our first rapid review episode. Like the rest of the world, we have seen the Odyssey, and we're going to have a chat about what we think about it. My name is Matthew Hook. I'm a lifelong TV and movie obsessive and a storytelling advisor to all kinds of organizations around the world.
And my name's Phil Kingsland-John. I am a theatre maker and a filmmaker, and I teach young people how to make films.
So before we dive into the Odyssey, a couple of little bits of housekeeping. First thing is, this is actually the first episode we've recorded and are putting live since we have gone live. So to those who have given us some nice feedback, thank you very much to everybody. If you do listen to this and you like it, please do like and subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. Those are all the places where we are at the moment. Obviously, if you do like, subscribe, review, etc., that's very helpful. And share it with people you think will get a kick out of it. That would be great. And also, if you have any strong opinions, then let us know. Drop things in the comments. We've actually got an email address now as well, so you can email us at theinfinitescreen@gmail.com. I'm hoping this is an episode that will trigger some strong opinions. On this occasion, we're doing a rapid review of the Odyssey, which generally we won't be reviewing movies all the time as they come out, but we have just completed 2 episodes about Greek mythology on the screen, and therefore it's very natural, really, for us to delve into the Odyssey right now. If you do like this, go back and check those out.
I'm really interested to get into our opinions on the film. But what is undeniable is that Nolan has created an event, and it's, from the controversy of those first trailers to the further outrage of the woke casting to the phenomenal first wave of reviews. It's a must-see film, which is impressive.
I think some of the early reviews have tended slightly towards the deferential, and I think that's been orchestrated very, very cleverly by everyone marketing the movie, I think. So this definitely isn't going to be that. We're going to get stuck in, but I probably would start by saying it has been really exciting to see like a big, smart, ambitious movie really being massive and everyone talking about it and getting everyone excited. I don't think anyone's ever achieved this kind of traction with Greek mythology before, which is quite exciting. But that being said, we're going to get properly stuck in today. Phil, you and I always talk about films that we've seen, but we've been very well behaved on this occasion and have not said a single word thus far about our experiences of watching this film. So yeah, that's been an unusual experience.
Indeed, indeed. We are going to let this, I don't know, the conflict of our insights just flower organically.
Phil, where did you see this film?
Well, not on IMAX, I must confess. I saw it at the View Cinema in Exeter, where I live, and yeah, I mean, not a massive screen, to be honest. I was very busy rushing around doing other things, and my dad was also insisting that I take him, so I had to fit into a certain window of availability. But so I guess from that perspective and Nolan's grandiose dreams and visions, not ideal, but how about you?
I've been on holiday traveling in the last week. So I've been in Normandy. So I actually saw this film in Deauville, which in a lovely old fashioned cinema there with my 2 oldest children who are both Greek mythology mad. So saw it there, which was lovely. It does mean it was a reasonable size screen, but it did have French words on it quite a lot of the time. So I had to get used to just not looking at the bottom 10% of the screen.
Interesting.
Okay, so we're going to dive in. We're going to do a few things. We're going to get some overall reactions. We're going to talk a little bit about the story that Christopher Nolan has chosen to tell, as we talked about in our last podcast. There's any number of versions you could tell. So we're going to talk about the story he chose to tell. We're going to talk about performances and casting. We're going to talk about world building. We're going to talk about some of the details of the craft and how it's been brought to life before coming back for some general impressions. But let's start with Phil, what is your overall reaction to seeing this movie?
Well, I for the first half of it, I kind of hated it. I was really struggling. Well, not struggling. It felt like a almost like a pastiche of a Nolan film. Like everything was so dour and bleak and humorless, and with that kind of the structure, which I do kind of think works. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But yeah, first half of it I hated. Second half, I think it kind of crystallized a little bit what he was trying to do with it. Made a bit more sense. A couple of moments actually hit for me. So yes, overall, I didn't think it was a masterpiece of cinema. I thought it was an interesting adaptation. Emotionally, it didn't really do it for me. How about you, Matthew?
Yeah, I think my impression is surprisingly similar to that. I thought we might have very different points of view, but I think I've been really excited, as we said at the beginning, about the whole phenomenon of it. And I was very impressed by the scale and the ambition. And that's partly why I want to go and see it again, because I think there are lots of things I would be more impressed by the second time when I'm not hunting for what movie is this? What's going on? Where's it going? I think, like you, I found the beginning of it weirdly flat and quite boring.
Is that because it's mainly Telemachus
Yes, there's
is
a lot of Tom Holland. There's a lot of just very talky exposition at the beginning. Yes, it started with a lot of all the stuff that I think is least successful about the movie and just gave us absolutely tons of it before gradually warming up and starting to talk about Odysseus. I think my overall impression was I liked it. I enjoyed it. I was impressed by different elements of it, but I wasn't ever kind of 100% emotionally attached to it. I could see in the end what story he was trying to tell. And in the end, I thought he told that story quite well, albeit, as I said, had to give a pass to basically the first 15 minutes, which I thought was pretty poor. The other part of it is obviously it's difficult to watch it without going, what's the movie that I would have made, or what the things that I would have done? But it's honestly, it's quite a drastically different movie. So I have to kind of put things in two pots of going, that movie, what was good about it? Some things were great, some things were less good than I was expecting. But then you've got the road less traveled of what are the different things we could have done that would have made a movie that I would have absolutely loved. And there's some pretty fundamental choices that Christopher Nolan made that I thought, oh, you've just decided to leave all that stuff on the table. That seems like a shame.
Yes, and I think there is something about the Nolan style and how that kind of manifested itself here. It was disappointingly unsurprising in lots of ways.
You did say on Greek Mythology 1, which is one of the episodes, a couple of episodes ago in our stream, you said, I've got a feeling this is gonna be a movie, not a bad movie as such, but a movie that I don't particularly like, which is likely to be quite dour, quite humorless. That I think that is the movie that we saw, don't you think? It was yeah.
Definitely, definitely. I stand by it for once. I stand by what I said. Yeah, I didn't particularly like it. I thought there were interesting bits in it. Well, we might have changed our opinions, of course, by the end.
Well, maybe let's start with, I guess, the story that they decided to make out of this movie. And I think an interesting point to pick up on, he's kind of decided to make a war movie or a post-war movie, which is not
Yes.
particularly how I read the story or have ever read the story of the Odyssey.
There's a line in Homer's Odyssey where Odysseus shouts out to Polyphemus, the Cyclops, "It is I, Odysseus, sacker of cities." So he fully embraces his warrior heritage and his warrior spirit there in a way which this version of the Odyssey and Odysseus is completely different. The central premise is that he has been scarred essentially by his experience, and that is certainly not something that he would cling to in such a prideful way in Nolan's version. So I think that is kind of, yeah, a fundamental difference. I don't think Homer's story is really about this at all, which might lead us into a conversation on whether it's been hijacked to tell a different story or to kind of explore different themes or themes that are not essentially latent in the
Yeah.
original.
Look, I think if you're taking a story like this and making it into a movie, you have to simplify it in some way. So you have
Yeah,
to, I guess, in a sense, choose a thread and commit to that
sure.
thread. And the
But I don't
thread
think
that
he's
he committed
simplified
to, yeah.
it. He's just done something different with that, which in itself is fine. It's fine. We have a sense of the Greek mythology from what few sources have kind of haphazardly endured, where we know enough to know that it was a teeming multiverse of different versions and different interpretations. So that in itself is not an issue, other than if you pitch it as an adaptation of Homer's Odyssey.
Yeah, I think also there's lots of characters that you could have chosen to anchor this story, but Odysseus is a really, in a sense, an odd one to choose. If you were choosing someone who was, as you said, scarred by the horrors and the guilt of war, or almost like of not having fought war fairly, it feels like that's what he's scarred by, because he's got his like his bowstring thing, which he does to alert the boar or whatever it might be. And so he has that kind of guilt of not having fought fairly. It's really strange, really, in a sense, to choose Odysseus as the center point of that story. Because if there's one thing about Odysseus, it's, he's a trickster, he's smart, he likes to find smart ways to win. That's definitely not,
Yes.
never feels like his character flaw.
I suppose you could argue it's his tragic flaw. It's his hamartia, because that's the kind of that his kind of embracing of that, his pride in his cunning is what kind of means that Poseidon then decides to punish him by making this 10-year ordeal to get home.
But I guess in pretty much every version of an Odysseus story, you get the sense that that's something that he revels in and enjoys. And I don't know, there wasn't a lot of enjoyment or sense of enjoyment in this film anywhere, was there? It didn't really give
No.
Odysseus that sense of excitement or pride or kind of discovery or curiosity.
Yeah, they tried to pay lip service to it, but not perhaps successfully, in my opinion.
What I found also really weird about it, I guess this happens quite a lot with directors, is I'd recently gone back and re-looked at Oppenheimer, and it's extraordinary the extent to which he's basically telling some version of the same story again. Like it's here's an amazing person who's got great moral depth, but he's made some kind of core choice relating to technology and duty, and he's questioning whether it was the right thing to do. It's like he's made the same film again, but in a different era.
I totally agree.
It definitely had the opportunity to feel more adventurous and fun, this film, I think. Because kind of being Christopher Nolan, he extracted all the sexy stuff, all the funny stuff, all the magical stuff, barring a few exceptions, which I'm sure we'll come back to in a second, and decided he definitely wasn't telling like a kind of adventure story in any way whatsoever, which I think takes away most of your opportunities to have and to give your audience a bit of fun during this story. What did you think about that?
Yes, absolutely. Just on the off chance that anybody is listening to this who hasn't seen the Odyssey and it isn't totally 100% au fait with the story, it is the sequel to the Trojan War. All of these Greek soldiers come together, go to Troy, lay siege to the city for 10 years. Odysseus is kind of after his act of cunning, which is the famous Trojan horse, the idea of creating the Trojan horse. He then gets swept off course on the way home, and it takes him 10 years, and he has all kinds of magical adventures on the way. But as you're saying, it is kind of written as an adventure story. And when Nolan was paying, again, homage to the works of Ray Harryhausen, who came up in our Greek mythology episode, saying, that DNA is what kind of inspired his film, that actually made me quite hopeful. That made me think, oh, maybe there is like an element of that he's embracing for this. But I totally agree with you that there was nothing there in that spirit of adventure, and I think there's some kind of problematic issues that will perhaps come up later. But when you are using that story that is so kind of its world, of its era, to tell what felt like quite a modern story,
Mm.
there are lots of inconsistencies and I don't know, conflicts there for me.
Yeah, I guess he was faithful to the story structure. I mean, obviously, it's a picaresque adventure, and you could never include absolutely every chapter or every story. But in terms of story shape, he kept the same beginning and ending broadly, albeit with a caveat about the ending. But broadly, it's the same story structure. Broadly, it's the
Yes.
same adventures, obviously edited highlights. Mainly, probably picked the highlights that I would have picked, but it's more
Yeah.
like it's tonal and thematic. It's not like the things themselves were not the same things. And it was great to see some of those things on the big screen. I think some of them are more successful than others. And everything was slightly dreary and desperate and sad
Yeah.
and everything was to be viewed through the lens of kind of Odysseus as a dutiful military leader, and that you weren't going to get involved in the sense of adventure that he has about lots of these adventures, which in a sense is like that's the driving force of the story. That's what keeps them doing these crazy things. It's because he's excited about them, because he likes doing crazy things and getting into scrapes and getting out of scrapes and testing himself against those. So without that kind of joyful sense of adventure, it's slightly difficult to understand why some of these things are happening. So it's not
Yeah.
so much like the changing of the story, it's the changing of the theme and the tone that I've found a bit off-putting. The bits which
Sure.
were totally dedicated to that, I think, were the bits that work best. And I think the movie really pulls through towards the end, where that theme really becomes more explicit and alive. And you go, okay, if this is just a movie about that, about having done war and having treated people in the wrong way, then it kind of has coherence. But before that theme comes into relief, you're just kind of drifting around going, this is just a slightly miserable movie about being lost on a boat.
Well, I think that maybe leads us into talking about the structure. Maybe we might touch on the screenplay a little bit here as well, if that's right, Matthew.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, what were your thoughts on that, Phil?
Well, actually thought the structure of it is was fine. The structure kind of worked. I mean, we talked about that very talky beginning, but in general, both the Odyssey and the Iliad lean on flashbacks a lot. So it kind of, yes, it's Nolanistic, but it worked to me. And you've got the built-in conceit of the fact that he's with Calypso, having lost his memory, kind of reconstructing his memory. That all worked. So structure wise, and the fact that then kind of it did crystallize a little bit in terms of what he was perhaps thematically trying to achieve towards the end. So yeah, no complaints. Structure from me. Did you have any
Yeah, and
thoughts?
I think one of the best things about Christopher Nolan's films is that they're assembled like puzzles, aren't they? And you have this kind
Yeah.
of non-linear storytelling, which is occasionally jarring, but comes into relief. But yeah, that really works for this story, and it's there in the poem. And he didn't do it the same way that it's in the poem, but I thought that worked really, really well. And there are elements of the script as well that I thought were really powerful. I think the kind of last hour of the script I think works really, really well.
I feel like Nolan has a problem with dialogue when he doesn't lean on Jonah Nolan, his brother. I
Okay.
think because when they've collaborated, I feel like Jonah Nolan is a much better writer. Like the dialogue is much sharper and more poetic and more affecting. I thought the dialogue here was kind of pretty on the nose in a couple of places in really weird ways. Like I think one of the first lines you hear Odysseus say is 10 years on this fucking beach, let's go home, which is just okay. Like, right, yeah, okay, we get the picture where you are, what's been going on. And later on he says our age of bronze is collapsing. It's so I don't know, clunky and clumsy to me. What did you make of the very American register?
Yeah, I didn't hate it. And one of the things that I quite liked was, I guess, its ability to move between a more informal and a more formal register. So I didn't mind, for example, Telemachus calling Odysseus like dad at some point and stuff like that, because I think that's in a sense truer to the register of the Odyssey and how it works. Like it isn't all in grand, high flown poetic.
Yes.
It moves between different registers. So I didn't mind that. I guess I more had an issue from a dialogue perspective. There weren't that many of these relationships that I really felt were real or were interesting. And the ones that there were really threw the others into relief. So it's kind of like Odysseus's relationship with his buddy Eurylochus, Himesh Patel, that kind of felt, oh yeah, that feels a bit like a real relationship. Yes, they're kind of colleagues or whatever, but they spent a lot of time together. That felt quite like a real relationship. But
Yes, absolutely. And that
yeah,
tension, I think he was kind of interesting because he was torn, his loyalty was torn, wasn't it, between the men and Odysseus. That worked.
but Odysseus's relationship with Calypso didn't feel like a real relationship. His
I felt very
Telemachus's
sorry for him.
relationship with Penelope didn't feel like a real relationship, and they've literally just spent 10 years, locked in a house together.
Well, I maintain to anyone who'll listen to me that Nolan can't write women. And I don't think he comes across as a very unsexual or asexual being, because I feel like the romances or romantic relationships in all of his films just feel like an imitation, feel like an alien trying to work out, or whose only concept of love and romance is from watching films. I felt really sorry for Charlize though. She,
Yeah.
she looked great, brilliantly cast, but basically had so little to do.
Yeah, I mean, should we get into some of the characters? I think pretty much all the female characters had a pretty raw deal in this movie, one way or another. It felt like because it's really noticeable with the source material, because Greek mythology generally, as we've talked about in our last couple of episodes, but the Odyssey specifically, is full of very strong women characters with a lot of agency and a lot of control and you know a lot to do, and I felt like there wasn't a single female character who didn't feel smaller or lesser in this adaptation than they felt in my mind or in my reading of the
Mm.
story. Like Penelope has her kind of craftiness taken away. I've always loved her as a character in the story. Calypso was like reduced to a cipher, and
Mm.
there was no sexual attraction or no craftiness in her relationship with Odysseus, apart from she was giving him flowers to eat. She didn't really get given anything to do apart from sit there and say, "So Odysseus, tell me something else you remember about your soldiers, and so that we can have another flashback."
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, I
yeah,
think there is, because this version reportedly Christopher Nolan was influenced by a recent translation by Emily Wilson, which I think I haven't read it, but from what I can glean is a slightly feminist work. There are problems with the original in terms of like Circe and Calypso, this kind of just line of seductresses, basically. Who
yes.
so I think there was obviously an effort to try and get away from that and to make both those characters something other. But yeah, again, I feel Penelope, she had some really kind of clunky lines to deliver about, oh, it's shit for women, isn't it? Whereas there's so much kind of weirdness and richness and ambiguity that you could go into with that scenario. It's like Jocasta in Oedipus as well. This idea of a woman being made by default the figurehead of a nation, and then the all of these kind of males wanting it and striving for it, but in order to do that, they somehow have to tame her or claim her or win her. Like that's really
Mm,
really interesting, and kind of points back to perhaps a conflict between matriarchal societies and then patriarchal kind of
yes.
systems coming in to replace them. All of that is fascinating and deep, and you could go in so many different directions. But again, that's not what interested Nolan.
No,
Or
he mainly just stuck her behind a barrier, and she didn't have any interaction with the other people in her world. Like she doesn't really have any conversations with the suitors until quite late on. She's like always at a distance, which is just struck me. Whereas she's like the person in control of that court and that situation, and it didn't feel like she was given control. Calypso
yeah,
was just weird. I just felt like she was running some kind of hipster yoga retreat.
yeah,
That
yeah,
was very
absolutely.
a weirdly low stakes, just kind of yeah, for Charlize Theron as well, which is like very weird use of that casting, having cast it so well.
Yeah.
I guess the exception is Circe, and Circe felt like she'd burst in from another movie, and all the better for it. I thought that scene was really into. Although as a character, again, she was kind of put in this kind of squalid, unimpressive world, but she was
Yeah.
definitely allowed to use her personality a bit more, and I thought that scene was one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
What about Odysseus himself?
I think that he was, as an adaptation of Homer's Odysseus, as we've perhaps hinted at, he didn't have the riddling speech. He didn't have the quickness of wit. He didn't have that kind of mercurial brilliance, that twinkle, that sparkle. He was fine. He kind of carried it, but again, I think he was kind of compromised, yeah, on the one hand by the script and on the other hand by the direction. it seemed like everybody was directed towards a slightly kind of flat. I don't know if he was trying to go for like contained emotion, like suppressed emotion, but like the fact, when he meets Telemachus for the first time, there's no hint of like, oh my God, this is my son, and I can't tell him who I am, and like nothing at all. It's just
Yeah.
perfectly, yeah, this is the plan. I'm going with the plan. I feel no emotional connection whatsoever.
Yeah,
So
very restrained and dialed back. Yeah. Also thought it was a bit of an opportunity missed because I feel like in some slightly earlier Nolan films, you do get some good kind of enigmatic, charismatic, trickstery type characters. If you think about, I guess to an extent, Leonardo DiCaprio in Inception, although that's also quite a kind of it's quite a dour film as well, I guess. But he has that like craftiness of like creating a plan, creating a world. And I always think also back to Christian Bale in The Prestige,
mhm.
who's the kind of again a mysterious trickster kind of character. You thought, oh, I would have liked to see some of that character in this character. Like you don't get any moments where Odysseus is kind of making a plan and it's incredibly crafty and clever. But I also think Matt Damon can play that character.
Well,
Think
he did,
about
yes, I've seen him do it,
yeah,
absolutely.
if you think about him in Rounders, think about him in Talented Mr. Ripley, like he's really good at that kind of like different levels. It's like I look
Yeah,
serious, but under the surface, I'm crafty, and under the surface, I'm laughing. Like, and he has that amazing
absolutely.
grin that he uses in some movies of just like
Yeah.
you smug son of a bitch. And I kind of wanted to see that grin in this, like his
Absolutely. And when you see him
goodwill
in interviews,
his goodwill hunting grin.
yeah,
I think belonged
yeah.
in this film at some point.
And when you see him in interviews, he's very kind of, yeah, alive and great conversationalist, great. Yeah, he's got great charisma. I also thought like physically, like he looked amazing, obviously, but he looked like so obviously the product of, personal trainers and super gym and protein supplements. And maybe that was kind of okay for the wartime version. Like by the time he arrived, he looked every bit as great as he looked at the start of the film. You kind of want him to be this kind of wizened, twisted bent. The whole point of her not recognizing him
Yeah,
is not because he's got the like de
got a hat
facto
on.
beggar disguise. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
the fact that he's been so changed,
yeah,
so beaten down that he's not obviously the person he was before. To go raging bull on it,
yeah.
definitely. He needed to actually alter his physicality over the course of the film.
Apart from some of the excellent work being done by his beard, you didn't
Yes.
really you didn't really have that sense of the miles traveled. Like you didn't
Yeah.
get a great sense of the difficulty of the journey. And I guess also, the way that they did the calypso bit where he's literally just been in a kind of drug haze the whole time. You just get the feeling he's just kind of gone into cold storage for a few years, just eating some flowers.
Yeah, whilst obviously still maintaining his daily routine of press ups and sit ups and all the rest.
Yes. There were
Yeah,
some
yeah,
small bits that I loved. So definitely some minor characters. Also, this was funny because this was so much of the faux outrage before this movie was launched in the Muskosphere. But lots
yeah.
of the things that people were pulling out and going, "Oh, that's wrong," actually felt like they were some of the kind of most spirited elements. I quite enjoyed the Helen of Troy, Clytemnestra twin casting
Hmm.
bits. I thought that was fun and interesting.
Yeah, that was interesting. Just very quickly, what that makes me think, if Helen is supposed to be the most beautiful woman in the
Yeah,
world,
yeah.
that all of the kings want to her to be their wife, and they have to come up with this treaty that
Mm.
if whoever is selected, the others will band together.
Yeah,
If if she is
there's
just
another
one of
one.
two, maybe her personality was much better than her sister.
Yes, although obviously this film's take on that story in any case is it was just a pretext by Agamemnon to go and conquer Troy anyway. So they kind of
Yeah.
dodge in their version of the world, they dodge that whole thing.
I did think it was quite an interesting idea, though, and I did also kind of, I, yes, interesting the idea that old Menelaus has scarred her by
Yeah.
the face that launched 1,000
Yeah, it
ships.
looked pretty grim.
But I like the fact that her spirit was undaunted.
Some other good bits I enjoyed. I thought they could have done more with. I quite enjoyed like the Travis Scott framing bit at the beginning, where he's kind of
Oh
singing the
yeah, he's
song or telling the
very
story.
underused. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just felt they should have gone a lot further with that. It made me think of kind of when we talked about A Knight's Tale recently and thinking that could have been a good mechanic actually to have a storyteller woven through the story because he's there at the beginning, he's there at the end, but he probably a bit more
Yes.
from him. And he had a great screen presence as well. I have to admit, I don't really
Absolutely. I
know who
wanted,
he is as a musician, but as a screen
yeah.
presence, he was good.
Yeah, I wanted more of that. Apparently, that beating the staff thing, there is some suggestion, some evidence that they might have used that as a storytelling technique. But it felt, again, it felt half-baked, it felt underbaked. It felt like, yeah, there was great potential there. Almost too many framing devices, perhaps. You've got the
Yeah.
kind of the Calypso amnesia, you've got the storyteller, you've got the Telemachus' arc as well. Too many story devices.
A couple of other minor characters I liked. I enjoyed Himesh Patel was Eurylochus. I thought that was good
Yeah,
and a good way of telling the story. What did you think of the Cersei scene? I think Samantha Morton's brilliant, and I really enjoyed the
yeah,
slightly more extreme weirdness and grimness of that scene versus everything else. I thought it was quite cool.
I don't know. That scene fell in the middle of my shifting between I really don't like this and trying to work out what he was trying to do. I was just a little bit unengaged. Well, I remember thinking that it was kind of interesting, like it seemed very like Nordic or Scandinavian or like Northern Europe, the setting, and thinking which then kind of again when they went to hell as well, felt very kind
Yeah.
of, Arctic Circle type stuff. But yeah, there's some amazing locations.
I thought definitely the least successful performance is Telemachus, unfortunately. And I have a soft
He
spot
killed
for Tom
it.
Holland in his Spider-Man incarnation, but I've got to say, in this world, I thought he was weak sauce, to quote our friend Tarantino. I thought he was very weak sauce. He's kind of supposed to be the emotional anchor of this version of the story, I think, and I didn't get that at all.
Yeah, I thought he was doing his best, but again, he didn't have much to work with, I don't think, in terms of dialogue slash direction.
I had absurd amounts of exposition to do. There were just bits where I like, this guy's just been talking for 3 paragraphs about
Yeah,
what's going on and how it came to be. It's like, could
yeah.
they not have done this in another way?
And absolutely, he was also not served well by the wardrobe department. He had some terrible costumes that he had to wear. So if we are talking about like emotional moments, character moments that did hit for me,
Yeah,
then the best moment, single moment by far of the whole film for me was when the old female slave was bathing the beggar's foot and
yes,
noticed the scar and he stopped her from saying anything.
yeah,
Like for that moment was real. That moment
yeah.
was beautiful and brilliant and almost kind of justified a lot of all of the extraneous stuff. And the other moment emotionally that really worked for me was so Zendaya, interesting casting. I felt like for the whole film, I was like, what is she doing there? She's just popping up. She doesn't really have anything to do or say. But towards the end of the film, it becomes clear that he's frozen that image of her as Athena because he witnessed like, maybe a priestess or a Vestal
Yes,
version of the temple being
yes.
beheaded. And that I thought was a great idea. And that's kind of justified that as well. I think that was probably the moment which really crystallized my understanding of what they were going for with this whole kind of PTSD treatment of
Yeah.
Odysseus.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the slightly weird thing about the film in that it kind of that's one of a few moments in the final third that really gather you up and help you make sense of the story that you've been seeing and you suddenly go, I can see why you'd want to play that trick. And I think Nolan's really good at playing that trick of like, here's something that's been in plain sight all the time, but you didn't understand it, and now I'm going to reveal and pull the curtain away and then the penny's going to drop. And I think that was a great example. I thought that was the most powerful moment of the film, but you're kind of not given many of those clues early on. So yeah, it pulls together at the end, but it does leave you drifting for a long time. And I think one of those things is he made the call again, ultimately, I think, to make the gods not visible in this world.
Yeah.
Obviously, it wasn't clear that he'd made that call because you think that you're looking at
Yes.
Athena, but my feeling at the end is we're not really looking at Athena. We're looking at phantoms,
Yeah,
guilt-driven
absolutely.
phantoms in Odysseus's mind, which makes total sense in the story.
Yeah.
But where that really leads you is this is a kind of godless world again. All the gods are remote or distant. They've just sent down some laws or some rules remotely, and then people are on their own. And again, for me, I always think this is a miss because
Yeah.
for me, these are characters that are living in a world where gods are all around them doing incredibly unpredictable, violent,
Yeah.
hilarious things. And he made the call to make it really, it felt to me much more like a kind of Christian world in a sense, with,
Yeah.
very
Well,
fixed rules and laws, and self-denial is the main
absolutely.
rather
It's
than
modern
like a
America.
Greek world. Yeah. And it was, yeah, I thought it was a shame.
I think it's very explicitly modern America, like with some slightly problematic elements of obviously it's a monarchy and they have slaves. But yeah, it's all right, we'll skip over that. Because like that kind of like so the casting, the very multicultural casting, that insistence that no matter what ethnicity you are, we're all Greeks together. And yeah, there's just that kind of the treatment of the military experience and the PTSD. I think it was, if not 100%, it was, 70, 80% modern America.
But at the same
Um,
time, obviously, the whole plot hinges on understanding this principle about guest law,
yes,
kind of weirdly described as Zeus's law in this film.
it's fundamental, this idea of Zeus's law, or the idea of hospitality to strangers, and that comes up time and time again, and is treated really as a like microcosmic version of their whole system of morals, which Odysseus feels he kind of betrayed and were abandoned by the Greek force en masse when they sacked Troy, paying no attention to the fact that in the 10 years previous to that, all kinds of atrocities have been done and people have been
Yes.
taken as slaves and everything else. But yeah, that I think that was the central conceit. I totally agree with you. I'm fine with the gods not being explicitly shown. But if you are going to lean into that idea of a world where the morality is built on these gods and ideas of what they kind of propose and expose, then I wanted to see the ritual, the ceremonial life of these characters where the gods are present. There was no
Yeah.
kind of ritual, no ceremony, no weirdness. All of the designs were so kind of like streamlined and sterile. The one moment where I thought, we're going to get it when they go to the temple, you could just see the extras had just been told, I'll just stand in the background, wave a branch. Yeah, you've got a candle.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
there was no kind of authenticity to that. There was no depth of thought into what those rituals might have been, or how these characters would pay like daily devotion to their gods, or anything.
How did you feel about the visual realization of this world? What were the bits you liked, and what were the bits that were not
Yeah, I mean, it
impressive?
obviously felt very much like the story had been taken out of the Mediterranean. That in itself, I thought, I don't have a problem with. We talked about, I think I mentioned in passing as one of my also rans, a film which I love, which is Lars von Trier's version of Medea, which takes Medea to some like boggy fen wasteland of
Yeah.
Northern Europe and works brilliantly. So I don't have a problem with that. I thought the degree of craft and care that had been put into building the ship and filming on the waves, that is impressive from a cinematic perspective. I thought, yeah, design wise, realization of the world, I thought the Trojans reminded me of the enemy in the Top Gun movies. Like they're the enemy. They all had these helmets on. They were just faceless. They were the enemy. They're just like a metaphor for the enemy. Didn't go into any of the like traditional Trojan characters or any of that. Felt like a choice. It didn't particularly resonate with me emotionally, but perhaps made sense again with this idea of it as a metaphor for the soldier's experience. The Cyclops is the first monster that you encounter. It's so weird, just coming out of nowhere, like the whole kind of dour, grounded flavor of the film, and then there's this monster there. I felt like I needed what I wanted. I craved for the style of the film itself to like fragment at some point, to feel like, hang on, this is something's happened here. They're not where they thought they were, or the world has shifted. I thought Polyphemus, so the Cyclops, Polyphemus, is a character that I have played myself.
Ah.
I think to take away his power of speech, like again, they paid lip service to it. They had him recognizing that he was talking some words when he was gibbering in the corner. But to take away his ability to converse with Odysseus, to take away that kind of battle of wits, to me sucked everything that I love about that character out of it. I thought the way it was done with the kind of the weirdly grown human, the kind of deformed face, that was the design was great.
Yeah,
Looked good,
yeah.
but he had no personality. And I think that incident, that episode, lots of people who don't really know the Odyssey know that episode. And it's that the whole thing he tricks the basically famously in the story. Themis is not perhaps the brightest. He asks Odysseus what his name is, and he says nobody. And then when he's been blinded at the end and the other Cyclopses are asking what's happened, he says, nobody has blinded me. Nobody has done this to me.
For me, the whole story is a series of battles of wits where there is both drama and horror and humor. He's decided one of the choices he's making is to take all of the humor and all of the battle of wits out of the movie all the way through, which
Mm,
unfortunately and is a choice that makes sense in terms of making a coherent film, but for me, unfortunately,
yeah.
has already decided to take out everything that I like about the story right at the beginning. And the Cyclops, yeah, that really, because that is the ultimate, yeah, it's a very crafty episode. Like it's a totally unnecessary scrape that Odysseus gets himself into, that he gets out of in an ingenious way, and then unnecessarily racks up some bad karma points because he can't resist bragging about it. Like that's the
Right.
epicenter of the story, and that pattern is repeated in different ways all the way through the story. But this version was
Yeah.
just man is in cave, monster appears,
Yes.
they get out of the cave, and he didn't save as many of his men as he could have done.
Well, they made this big thing that he chose to fire an arrow at him.
Yeah,
You could
yeah,
see that Nolan was aware that certain beats had to happen
yeah,
or were intrinsic to the character, and that was his answer to, oh, how does that work in my version?
yeah,
But it didn't really ring true because they've just blinded him. They're fighting for their lives. I think that
yeah.
felt justified.
That's the core of the story
Yeah.
because he is just like the smart guy who just can't resist bragging on his smartness a little. But he obviously didn't want to put that into the
Yeah.
character. But I don't really know why.
Yes, well, indeed. I think he kind of, for whatever reason, it broke his own rules of the
Yeah.
realism that he was trying to achieve. But I have to kind of disagree quite vehemently on the other monster stuff. I hated it all. I thought
Okay.
the weird Space Marines
Weird. I
sequence,
didn't really understand why that episode was in the
I would
film
have
at
cut
all.
that.
It
I
it
would have
didn't do
cut that.
anything to drive the story forward, did it?
It was so odd, and the filming of it really annoyed me because they were kind of shown as like very kind of slow and lumbering, and the Greeks were running away, and then it would cut to a different angle where
Yeah.
they had miraculously caught up. Yeah, it felt sloppy, felt unnecessary. The bit that I really hated monster-wise was Scylla because I thought, okay, we haven't had a monster for a while. What are they going to do with this? And then it happens, and it's so like fleeting. It felt like an episode from or a part of Cloverfield. You know, that
Right.
kaiju, that found footage kaiju film, where just something will come and snatch out of the corner of the frame when you're not ready, and then by the time the camera is caught up with it, it's just disappearing. Like there was no I don't know. If you're making that film, surely a fun day at the office is to sit down with your art team and say, right, what's our version of Scylla going to look like? And actually, they come up with nothing like grey, featureless, some snaky heads.
Yeah.
Yeah, great, sweet.
But again, it's
Move
this
on.
question
What we
of
got
tone
next?
for me. It's like because everything in the tone has to have this kind of slightly dried out, slightly bleak, slightly muted feel. It's like you've therefore put that layer over everything. And I did get a
Yeah.
bit excited because I didn't think the Cyclops was like that. I agree with your point about him not being able to talk as a waste, but visually, I was like, oh, that's actually a
Yeah.
really bold choice because you run the risk of that looking stupid. But I don't think it does like his kind of Picasso-y style face where everything's at slightly the wrong angle, or like, oh, that's not how I'd visualize it. That's a bold choice. Actually, I think it's quite interesting. But then they didn't do that for everything else. Everything else, it was just like muted, dial it down, make it feel
Yeah.
realistic. And you're like, it's not a realistic film. What's the point of making it feel realistic? Therefore, the bits that did work better visually, I thought, were the things that fitted his tone and
Mm.
what he was doing more naturally. So, for example, I quite liked when he goes to what's supposed to be the underworld and
Mm,
stuff is kind of coming out of the mud and the ooze. I thought that worked
mm.
quite well because it worked so well with the tone that he'd established, the slightly funereal, bleak, dark tone, taking that
Yes.
darker and putting it in the shade world. That for me did work quite well.
I thought that, yeah, I mean, talking about the Ray Harryhausen thing, I think it was clearly an homage, wasn't it, of the dead coming up
Yeah.
through the black, like obsidian sand or whatever it was. Yeah, that scene, like, look, I think you could take any still from that sequence and you would think, yeah, that looks beautiful. Weirdly, in process, when things were moving, I that scene left me wanting more. Perhaps because I thought there was potential
Yeah.
in the direction they'd gone. But I think again, I can mention before like this, the direction of the extras and stuff. I really take issue with because he's got huge casts, obviously huge casts of extras there. He doesn't seem to know what to do with them, or he doesn't care about them. I don't know if I'm just projecting here, but it's so often it seemed to me those extras were just doing perfunctory routines, perfunctory
Right.
movements. Like when the doors of Troy finally open, I could tell, or I imagined I could tell, that all of the extras were just told, right, run at the camera really fast, look fierce.
Yeah.
Like it didn't seem authentic at all. When they're taking away all of the weapons from the Ithacan Great Hall, you could just tell they were just told to come up, take a weapon, turn around, go off. Like it, where was these characters' individual personalities and stories and
Yeah.
idiosyncrasies? And I felt the same at the death scene. It felt like the extras were being choreographed in such a way to do this at that point, move that it didn't seem.
I get that with lots of Nolan's films. Like I think that the thing he's known for is like when he's up and running, he's very efficient. Like he's mapped out everything. He knows exactly where he wants everything to be in his mind, and he doesn't do lots of retakes or lots of in-depth work. And I think that's obviously much admired by Hollywood executives because he brings everything in like
Mm,
$50 million lower than you expect it to be for the complexity of what
right.
he's doing. But I think for me, this is where it shows up in his films. So I remember feeling the same about the Dark Knight. I can't remember which Dark Knight movie it was. Definitely the second one, but I feel like maybe the first one as well. Where again, there's lots of crowd scenes in those movies. It's like this is now just crowd runs around. Like you don't have that
Yes.
sense of like drama or pain or danger. And
Yeah.
I think it is slightly procedural. I think he's got this very controlled way of making films, which
Mm,
enables him to get spectacular things done
yeah.
surprisingly efficiently. But I don't think
Yeah.
he's ever really like, he's not maximalist, is he? He's not like going, what's the most I could get out of this scene? What's the most drama and intensity I could put into it? It's like, how do I get this done in a very controlled way? Yeah, I feel like the whole film's a bit like that. I'm not going to see all the interesting, weird stuff. What's the point of the movie? Because that's what it is. That's what an
Yeah.
Odyssey is. It's you want to take this very tight little emotional space of like man feels guilty on the sea,
Mm,
and you don't want to step outside that. So you don't want to see the emotional reactions of the crowd because that will distract
mm.
you from looking at Matt Damon standing 3/4 profile thinking about what he's done.
Maybe this is a bit of a segue into what I feel. So being like obviously not particularly successful actor myself, I've been in lots of kind of like student films and low budget things and like amateur filmmakers. Like the biggest kind of recurrent thing that you encounter is directors who are just obsessed with cameras. And they basically they're completely blind to performance. And it's not that they are, deliberately ignoring you, but they can't tell. They can't tell the difference between a good performance and a bad performance because it's just not how they're wired. And I really get that impression with Nolan that he's an incredible technician, an incredible proceduralist, as you say, that's a great
Yeah.
word for it. But and he's kind of built up this prestige where he can cast brilliant actors and just he just relies on their kind of our recognition of them as brilliant actors to do a lot of the heavy lifting. I think he's a kind of a fundamentally like unemotional person, and that's what I really crave. It's, you're right. It's amazing that he achieves these kind of technical set pieces, practical effects wherever possible. It makes me think of David Lynch, obviously kind of completely the opposite.
Yep.
He was filming Twin Peaks season 3. Saw a little behind the scenes clip of him basically losing it. He says, I've only been on location for 2 days. What am I supposed to do? I haven't had any ideas yet. It's like his kind of idea of like being open to, not having everything planned out, embracing the chaos, wanting things to suggest themselves in the moment is just completely alien to Nolan's way of doing things.
Yeah, I think he's also a brilliant story architect. And I think this is the reason why I want to go back and see the film again, because you take for granted, I think, just how smart Nolan is at structuring and layering on story.
Is there anything to say about this kind of the hubris of Christopher Nolan wanting to make a film entirely on IMAX, where he has to basically develop a new system where the actors can't even sit opposite each other because of the size of the contraptions and the fact that they had to like record on top so much of the dialogue? Because that's something that I thought the dialogue, like the recording of the dialogue, Nolan is somebody who has in the past been criticized for his like sound mixing and stuff. I didn't have any of those problems, but I definitely felt like the sound effects, the sound design of this world felt very, just again, like lacking nuance, lacking subtlety, lacking authenticity. He's kind of created this system for using IMAX cameras when there's only 41 true IMAX cinemas in the world. Is it really worth it? I mean, I feel like this, if we're talking about hubris and hamartia, is this Nolan's hamartia?
Well, and he's made a series of films in which the key flaw of the character is their obsession with pursuing technological or technical superiority over emotional connection and moral connectivity with the world. I mean, everyone just makes films about themselves, don't they, in the end? Before we move on to wrapping up, any little details of craft that jumped out at you, kind of costume, music, any little bits and pieces that leapt out as interesting?
Well, I suppose the realization of Ithaca was probably like stylistically the most successful bit to me. I totally agree with you in terms of how Penelope was kind of done a disservice, but it looked great. And the use of real locations as much as possible. I thought, yeah, that was all
Yeah.
convincing. That was all nice. Oh, I hated actually the idea again. I think this speaks to Nolan's kind of a moment of blindness. The fact that all of the beggars had exactly the same robes. Like it sets up this idea that on
Yeah.
Ithaca there's like a prescribed uniform that you have to wear if
Yeah.
you're a beggar. Like just little things like that just seemed very odd to me.
I really enjoyed Agamemnon's helmet,
Okay, yeah.
which was that kind of weird, it's like black and has that golden like spinal column type thing going on the back.
Yeah.
But I thought that was a really good object in that it was just kind of symbolized, I guess, the darkness of the mission and Agamemnon's own kind of
Yeah.
almost inhuman, implacable deathliness. I quite enjoyed that. And I felt like having gone there, I would have liked more of those kind of things. Things that are a bit,
Agamemnon, the treatment of Agamemnon, I mean, I don't want to waste ages talking about it, but it did seem also strange. Like a big thing was made of the fact that you never see Agamemnon's face.
yeah.
But like, why? If you were going to go with that, and as that design suggests that he is, yeah, the Death King, he's the architect of all of this destruction, then you kind of felt like you needed to be a more prominent part of the film.
The other thing I liked, but it was a bit buried, and there were moments where I really noticed the music, and it was actually quite interesting. I think the decision they made was basically in terms of the music to only use instrumentation which was or could have been around at the time.
Right.
And I think that was probably a good choice, but it felt overwhelmed by the overall just very action focused sound design. If like you just didn't hear the music very often.
Mm.
Versus something like Interstellar, which I watched recently, where you've got that kind of whole big choice he makes about having incredibly powerful pipe organs like dominating the movie. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. That's that little flavor of
Yeah,
trying to give
that
some
and
more historical flavor to it. But it obviously it
yeah,
just again it didn't add up into the vision of the film. So he just kind of it felt like he backgrounded it. Whereas that's the
yeah,
kind of touch that could have rooted you more in the place and in the time, which would have been interesting.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
actually, when
definitely.
you listen to it, I went back and listened to some of the music. Oh, this is really cool. Why did I not notice this? Well, while I was watching the film. Obviously, that is sometimes true of scores that you don't notice them at the time. But yeah, I thought
Yes,
it's
definitely.
overwhelmed by sound effects, I guess.
Yes, and I again, I really didn't like the sound design of the film, the sound effects. It felt like they were very clunky, very, yeah, just very inorganic. Like the creaking of the bows every time, like it was just seemed ridiculous.
The question that I'd like to land is how did you feel this landed as a Greek mythology story? So we recently created a top 10 of what we
Yes.
thought were the best adaptations of Greek mythology for film and TV screen. I guess two questions. Would this have
Mm,
appeared in our top 10 if it had already pre-existed 3 or 4 weeks ago when we started thinking about that? And if
mm.
not, why not?
Well, I am going to use this opportunity to bring up a film which I kind of, with hindsight, wished that I'd mentioned when we were doing that episode, and it has just escaped me for some reason. But I watched The Return with Ralph Fiennes as Odysseus when that came to cinemas maybe last year, and not an amazing film. Like I wouldn't have included that in my top five. But in terms of Rafe's version of Odysseus, a very interesting counterpoint to Matt Damon's. Like the physicality of Rafe in that film is amazing. And Rafe talks about how like the physique of Odysseus was something they deliberately worked on. And he said he wanted to look like a bundle of old ropes. I can't imagine Matt Damon going to his personal trainer. Can you make me look more like a rope? But yeah, that kind of that grittiness. And the film thing that that film does brilliantly is the moment which I think if you know the Odyssey, you are waiting for is when he strings the bow and he kills all the suitors. And in the return, that moment you spent the whole film waiting for it. And when it came, it was fucking great. It paid off. This time, I think that scene, I was waiting for it, I was waiting for it, I was waiting for it. You kind of you're getting the chills, you know what's going to happen, and then it dissolved into shaky cam, and it just seemed to go on forever. And you have this thing of like somebody upstairs is throwing weapons down, and it suddenly cuts to Robert Pattinson. He's like, "Oh, spear!" And then it goes, and it comes back to Robert Pattinson. He says, "A sword!" And it's like almost comedic. So I think I'm using that moment
Yeah.
there to. I don't think this is a great adaptation of the story. I don't think this is really a great adaptation or sensitive adaptation of Greek mythology. I think it's a hijacking of it to tell a different story, which is kind of okay. But I wished that those moments, the Cyclops moment and the killing of the suitors, for me, like it botched both of those.
Well, I had a little formula when we had that discussion, which was history, mystery, and like symbolism, I guess, like psychological symbolism generally. That's what we talked about in that conversation. I actually thought in the end, the historical transportation was quite effective in that it was just, it was drawing a parallel. It was saying the latter stages of the Bronze Age are equivalent to the latter stage that we are in now, where we have forgotten the principles on which our civilization is based. I thought that was what gave the movie a lot of its power. I think when you get to the end of the movie, pulling together, oh, this is an alien world that has different rules to our world, but it's very important that he's broken those rules and we are breaking our rules. So I think they kind of the historical framing worked not because it was accurate, but because it was kind of it did something interesting about the time travel between ancient Greece and here. So I felt that was kind of successful. I thought
Mhm.
the psychological symbolism of it, I think that's where he just decided to take, as we said right at the beginning, a bunch of character attributes or psychological problems that didn't really exist in the Greek world and just make that what the film was about, like the guilt of war or the guilt of being of trickery. It just seemed understood why it made sense
Yeah.
in the context of his own story, But that's where I go.
Yeah.
That just really isn't. It isn't pulling
It's like,
those themes that are in Greek mythology. It's more like a Vietnam War.
yes,
Sorry,
it's
a
like,
Vietnam movie, which is kind of fine. I
absolutely.
like Vietnam movies, but it's not. It's not drawing a
Yeah,
theme that's ancient and is in that world. It's drawing something that's modern.
absolutely. I think it is looking at the Trojan War, thinking, oh, it's an archetype of war. And
Yeah,
how does that relate to our 21st century American perspective of war? The Odyssey is the story of a soldier returning from war, and it's kind of abstracted and weird, and I can use that as the metaphor for PTSD and needing to bury things, needing to forget things, needing to remember things.
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's been the thought process behind it.
Which is fine, but it's just, as you said, it's just not the story. Like the story of being excessively carried away by your own cleverness and your pride in your own cleverness and the dangerous paths that can take you down. That for me is like, that is the story of the Odyssey, and it's not the story that he decided to tell, which is fine. But I think the big miss is it is the mystery. There just wasn't really a sense of mystery in this film. I liked the moments where it reared its head and you see it in the face of the Cyclops, and you see it in the stills of the underworld. And at those moments, you get more of that sense of awe in this film, but there's quite few of those, really. Final thoughts. Would you recommend that people go and see this film?
No, I wouldn't. I think, but I wouldn't. I also wouldn't like dissuade anyone from watching it. I think if you're curious from what we've said, from what you've picked up, then yeah, sure, go and see it. But I wouldn't say if you're like a casual movie fan or yeah, you're not missing out if you don't see it.
I know a lot of people that have absolutely loved it and have been
Yeah.
overawed by it. So I guess and it is an interesting movie. It's a more interesting movie maybe than I expected it to be. It had definitely made some choices about the story it wanted to tell. Those
I
choices
suppose.
slightly annoyed me, but that I'm not sure everyone would feel the same.
Do you think if this makes $1 billion, will we get a whole kind of stream of Greek mythology adaptations?
Well, I am really looking forward to some of the shit ones that are going to come in the wake of
Right.
this movie.
Yeah.
It'd be great if someone funny could make one of these films. I
Yeah,
think there's a lot of humor in Greek mythology, and
definitely.
yeah, and it's fair to say Christopher Nolan's left quite a lot on the table in that respect. There really wasn't anything even to raise a smile in this film, was there?
There was a couple of lines which you thought were written as quips, but they fell so flat. They landed so flat. Again, because it's just the flat delivery and the fact that everything around it is drained of humor and nobody like responded to it with any kind of smirk or glimmer or glint of anything. Thank you, Matthew. And anybody who's made it this far, leave us comments, tell us how wrong we are about things. And yeah, catch you next time on the Infinite Screen.